Hello, everybody. Grant Hunter here for another product conversations in the product growth leaders community. May, we've made a habit, or I've made a habit, I guess, if I make the decision, I make a habit of having the last one. This will be the third year in a row. We did product management and products we use. That was sort of the lead into, and we talked about product management in the real world in 2021. Last year, we did product management in the real world 2022. This is product management in the real world 2023. Over the year, it seems like we're struggling with how do we get people to understand what we do, what product management is. And gosh, I feel like helping people see it in the real world, not only does it make me happy when I see it in the real world, but I think it's a way that we can help other people understand what product management is. I'd love to get your take on, how can we leverage the real world and products we see and use and helping people understand product management?
I think a lot of the times when we talk about product management, it's like this weird microcosm of it. We're talking about road mapping, we're talking about prioritization, we're talking about stakeholder management, we're talking about burnout. But like when we see it and we notice it in real life, it's always just like, oh, this sparks joy. It's like, wow, this is really cool. I never even thought about it that way. Or I've never even thought about this as a product and I've been using it for 30 years. Like all of those things come together and it's I think it's important to ground ourselves in what our work actually is, which is like building stuff people want.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like is this worth us putting our effort into it? Um and it's not like making sure the developers ship on time. It's are we are we spending the time on the right things, and if not, like, should we pivot? Is it a sunk cost? Like it's um but we can't think about that if we're always kind of in the mess, in the fires. It's important to step back and like look at, you know oh, the sun is shining, maybe I should go for a walk, and you walk by and you're like, I never even realized like that this sign on top of this button tells people like how to actually cross the street properly with not getting run over by cars. Like it's silly little things like that that makes you think like, oh yeah, maybe like we need a bit more description over here for this button because nobody knows what this button does. And I think it's cool to just step back and take a look at other contexts.
My wife laughs at me sometimes. We were walking the dogs, we passed the stop sign, and the bolt for the stop sign had some like nut on it that once you put it on, it made it impossible for somebody to get it off. And I'm like, that was a requirement. That was product management. Somebody said signs are getting stolen. We need to make it harder. And she's like, oh my God, Grant. But I can't help it. That's sort of where my mind goes. And maybe
Is
it,
that
part of my
product
problem is,
management or design?
well, that's a little of, yeah, identify the problem design. I don't know. That's a good question. Uh, I think for me as a B2B person, most of my career, that's where the real world helps me because, most people don't see the products that I was a product manager for. It's not something that most people, there's a small group of market segments and personas who have that problem. So maybe it's how I connect to something because I've never been B2C. So with that said, we put this question, and my picture just went away. Oh, it came back. What is your favorite example of seeing product management in the real world? Uh, Boy, Paul Hatala came out quick and said politics. I thought that was an interesting take. But if you think about understanding problems and positioning there are some stuff there. Uh, Win-loss analysis, that was a good one. Eva, I loved your response. You talked about job seeking, and you talk about almost you shifted as the product but I've seen a ton of change in products for job seeking. I want to get your take on that as well.
Yeah, I think so I post about this a lot on LinkedIn. I think what job seekers as a whole, this isn't my favorite way to look at product management, but the one that I'm currently ingrained in 24/7 since exactly 5 weeks ago when I got laid off. I think we have to do our own research. We have to do our own competitive analysis. We have to appear marketable. I mean, there's so many things that we need to do. I am a LinkedIn premium member. Haha. No slide to them. But there's a new feature that LinkedIn Premium has now that when you look at the job, it has an AI prompt that says, "Am I a good fit?" And you click on it and it looks at the job description. Like it's almost like a job scan built in LinkedIn now. And it's live as of like a day ago. It'll scan the job description. It'll scan my LinkedIn profile. It'll look at the resume that I uploaded in the data and it'll tell me apply or don't apply. I mean, it's insane now. I mean, it's taking all this work out of me reading like job descriptions at like 4 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep due to my anxiety. So, but yeah, I think job seekers are now all product managers managing themselves the product, and whether they like it or not, they have to come out swinging to stand apart from their competition.
I've been taking a course called LinkedIn Leverage as sales guy, trying to teach consultants how to better position themselves. And it's interesting how much I used to take for granted what I put in my about me in some of my roles. And if AI is now going to be something that's helping people find stuff, consultants, candidates, whatever it may be, I think there's going to be a lot of change to how people maybe handle those things until it gets to the point where everybody's optimizing for the AI, and then where do we go from there, right? You know, as you look at this, are you seeing good products out there that are helping you outside of LinkedIn Premium?
I mean, I've always liked Otta, OTTA. I've seen Otta for a while. I like the way their app is. I like their website. They do a little blurb of what the CEO take is. You know, how often do candidates hear back? And I think LinkedIn is now copying Otta for a lot of ways because now LinkedIn will have a little blurb in there saying, oh, it typically takes the employer a week to contact or 2 weeks to contact. And I think they kind of took that off of Otta's dashboard. So I think Otta's a really big one that I like. Well Found, aka AngelList, is another one that I recently signed up for. Karen Cullum, she recommended it. She's one of our product growth leader members. Just to find more of those startup roles versus, you know, the huge corporations. So I'm kind of spreading myself on those 3 different platforms.
Awesome. And, you know, I think that's a place when we're using, right? We use products all the time. It's about what are the ones that you're using more. And with you, it's the job search ones right now. Thank you, Eva. May, as always, you came up with something that made me think, right? Small businesses are a great example of product management, especially when there's no VC backing. Talk to me where you're coming from.
If you run a small business, you're basically the product manager, right? Because you have extremely limited amounts of resources, and you want to make sure you do the right things. So you probably redirect your focus if you learn new things. You're always learning about what you're doing, because you have to constantly pivot because, you know, whatever your customers want tends to be what you need to do in order to make a living. So it's really thinking through that, like, how do you prioritize your life, your work, and also like what you end up doing. You know, when do you fire a customer? And I think a lot of that kind of nuance, like to think about, like, what is my strategy? Do I want to grow? How fast do I want to grow? How many people do I want to hire up? Like, how do I plan for the next stage of my company? There's a lot embedded in that, right? Like, it's like the pizza shop example that you brought up, I think, a year ago. It's like, what is my niche? Like, why do people come here?
Yeah.
What kind of
No,
experience do I want them to have?
no, the example you used of like a bookkeeper and accountant for creative artists, the pizza one was the example was in the shopping center near where I used to live, there was a Domino's 2 doors down from a Originals Pizza. They sold pizza, right? But they stayed in business for over 10 years next to each other, and they're still in business because one was selling high-end, good quality pizza that cost $15, $20 a pie, and one was Domino's.
Yeah. But also I think it's important to realize that like small business fail all the time, right? And so do products. We just don't
Yeah.
talk about it, right? We don't talk about failing products, killing off our products, retiring products, putting products into so-called maintenance mode. Like all of these things are aspects of product management as a part of the product management life cycle. And we don't value that. We don't think about it. We don't talk about it. But why not?
Well, I would argue that each of these small businesses, that is their product, right? They have to define if a product is a solution to a persona's problem, whether that problem is I'm a creative artist who needs accounting, or I want a special type of, I want Detroit style pizza or whatever it may be. They need to make a decision to choose what problems they're solving for which market segment and personas. And that means they are doing product management.
Well, and the small
On to
business can't hide the failure.
Yeah, no, they can't. And on to that, you guys will see at the end of the call, Clint's post in LinkedIn today and May's answer have inspired our next topic, which we'll do in January, which is going to be around failure. So I appreciate the inspiration from both of you guys. Dominic, you went sort of theoretical and academic on this instead of talking about a product. Talk to me about where you're, art and science and all this stuff coming together. Maybe this is what jazzes me about it and why I see it in the wild, but I'd love to get to, think about where your head is.
Yeah, I mean, my apologies. I didn't answer the question, first of all.
Oh, I do that all the time.
And
So.
I went on a rant because, I mean, look, I've studied the product management environment, communities and whatnot for the last 12 months, 18 months. And I still don't understand why product management is so misunderstood, right? And the challenge that we have is we have multiple, thoughts and way too many frameworks. And everybody is everybody. A lot of people get, attracted by fancy, shiny frameworks, right? Try to apply them, and I don't think it's the right way to do it. I mean, it's, at the end of the day is spend more time with your customer, understand, what they want, and then based on your knowledge of various frameworks, you apply, right? You just move forward with your own way of answering a pain point for a customer.
Yeah. And so in any type of product, whether it's a small business or your job search or whatever else, it's really about getting in there and being market focused and customer obsessed.
And yeah, and so to answer the question now, the one thing I've been looking at recently is the franchising model, right? Which is a very interesting product, right? You'll hear from me maybe later on that topic, because there's some interesting dynamics there as a product manager, how to best utilize franchising, and actually what are we trying to solve with franchising, right? Whose problem are we trying to solve?
I'll be honest, that you hit a point with me there, because I just had this conversation yesterday, and one of the things I love most when I see it is seeing strategy type stuff, entering new markets, entering new channels, and franchise is a very interesting way to try to scale and grow, but maybe it's not always the best. So I want to dig into that with you maybe later, maybe on our call next week.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dom. Elliot, so you talk about the tonal, and I guess you talked about that I was reading your post from the poll, not from this. For the Monday question, you said tough one to answer because you describe that product management is a career, it's a lifestyle, and you think about it all the time. And I subscribe to that as well. We'll get to your tonal when we get to the poll. Talk to me, when you say that it's this past year has helped you grow this understanding and this love for it.
Yeah, so I think it's also a matter of like where I've come from as well, like realizing I know we talked about psychological safety, but going back to that, I didn't have it during COVID, and it took me a while to kind of get it back. And I think I got a lot of that mojo back, both personally and professionally this past year. But that also comes with the idea of during that time that I was a bit off, shall we say, I also didn't invest in myself personally or professionally, and I fell a little bit behind. So one of the things that I'm really realizing is that when it comes to data, I am not as up to speed as others out there, and it's something that I need to work on. So I just think it's the matter of, I think one thing that Eva said was that we are a product as candidates, but we're a product as product managers as well. So we need to do both maintenance and feature development as well. So I think it's a very interesting approach. I kind of borrowed from Dominic and Eva when I did my answer, and I probably didn't answer the question either. So I guess I borrowed from you as well.
You know, the question is a prompt, and each person is going to go a different way with it. And so I love the conversation, but to me, you know, it is a lifestyle, right? I can't not see it, right? If I'm walking around and I see something, whether it's a UX, CX design type statement, like the stop sign, or a new problem solving, or oh, wow, look, there's Tide cleaners coming, and you know it's not Procter & Gamble. Somebody decided that Tide was going to bring them for their product more recognition, and Tide decided to license the name for some reason. Those are two product management decisions, right? Stuff like that. I can't not see that stuff. And that's where your answer, especially the first paragraph, resonated with me. So
yeah, I appreciate it.
Let's get to some of the people who did not answer in the community, get some thoughts on it. I'm going to start with Dominique. Dominique, talk to me. Where do you see, what's your favorite example of seeing product management in the real world? I mean, you work for a company that some people may see the product, but where do you see it?
Yeah, I didn't answer the question, and actually I need to pay, because I think I saw an email fly by. I'm not really clear on what email I should pay attention to answer questions going forward. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
So I haven't had time to think about it, but I will echo what Clay said above. Is I think product management is like the framework, and the logic behind it is very simple and very clear. And to your point, Clay, that somebody has to ensure it. I think part of the problem is there's a lot of people, like in my company, you know, we went from business mandated or business down to technology of what we should build to now supposedly building what the customer wants. And I don't see us doing it as well as I would hope. And so I think, I think what frustrates me is that there's a lot of hand waving oftentimes about this framework, that framework, doing it right. We're doing it right. We're customer. And then in the end, it's just basically whatever people want to move forward with, kind of. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but as opposed to really following the right protocol.
Yeah. Are there products you use where you feel like they follow the right protocol? Consumer or B2C or B2B?
You know, I mean, I want to like the product, I don't use this, but I want to say that, you know, iPhone is probably one that appears to be like really following what but it's also kind of a catch-22 because it's also like influencing, right? Greatly influencing to the point that my 14-year-old won't stop talking about getting an iPhone versus an Android. But yeah, that would be one that I would, you know, and maybe Spotify, things like that. But I think there's just a lot of waste going around in terms of like presenting and talking about frameworks, but not really applying them effectively.
Boy, Dominic, and now Dominique and Elliot, you guys are all just sort of, what we're realizing is that there's a whole bunch of bad product management going on, perhaps, and we're not doing it. And we might see some examples Maybe when we dig into the poll, we'll get a little more into some of those examples. But this has become a lot more philosophical about the failures of product management than I was expecting it.
Yesterday, the study that showed 60% of product managers want to quit their job, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the top job people want to quit.
Can you send me that? Can you
Yeah,
send
please, if
Yeah.
you could, I didn't see that.
I saw it from multiple people. Yeah. I think it was Clifton is it
I'll post
Gilly?
it in the chat.
Yeah, from Gartner had an interesting response to somebody. I don't remember whose post it was, and what he said was part of the problem. And in May, I almost tagged you, but I was on a plane when I saw it, so I wasn't like in a place to go find I was on my iPhone. He said one of the problems is there's no the career pathing, right? For product managers, there's not a lot of individual contributor career path. There's only, it gets pretty tiny at the top, and there's only so many places for people to go. And if you haven't read it, May wrote a wonderful article on career pathing and product management and the individual contributor type path and the need for. I think that's, at least he thought that was part of the problem that was out there. But it is, that was interesting. If you look at the other jobs on the list, product management is like much higher pay wise. You would think more in demand, people want to do it, yet it was there.
And what's interesting, as I'm going through interviews too, right? And looking at job descriptions, and then you go through the interview, it's like, yeah, check the box, area product manager, but this is not what we really need. We need this on top of it. It's like, why don't you put it in job description? Well, we don't know how to call it, right? And it's just amazing how confusing sometimes interviews go, right? And you get to build kind of a whole new job description and help that company identify what they actually really need. It's just amazing.
Well, I mean, Steve and I write about it a lot. Steve and I talk about it a lot. There is the lack of clarity for what is product management. I've had this conversation with a bunch of product leaders a year and a half ago, and one product leader likened it to Groundhog Day. They're trying hard to change this, that their people aren't being dragged into these fires and dragged downstream and becoming people doing it for other people and trying to pull them upstream. Yet every day comes and nothing they've done has changed it. It keeps repeating and repeating. I feel like we talk about that a lot, and maybe we need to keep talking about it purely for therapy's sake. But it's interesting how when we talk about product management in the real world, we've been sort of the conversation has slid to this. I'm going to raise that up in my priority list for topics at the beginning of the year next year, so we can dig deeper into it. Clint Dally, I'd love to get your take on product management. What's your favorite example of seeing product management in the real world?
Yeah, sorry, I had the reply written, and I had like 50 links open on my PC, and I just never hit the send button. So
I've been there.
I looked at it from the automotive industry. So if you look at some of the features that they're coming out with, one of the things that struck me is that having a forward-facing camera with the ability to have that running live all the time if you need it, and then download it to either a drive or if you can set it up to like a cloud link, to me is great. I mean, that's something that I think is super important. It resolves liability issues if you get into an accident, or it can help if somebody else gets into an accident. So things like that, I think, are really cool, where they're looking at what's going on in the environment, and then they're basically driving that into the product. The whole self-driving thing was very interesting. I'm sure you guys saw that Tesla recalled almost 2 million cars based on the fact that their auto driving now is looked at as dangerous.
Did you put air quotes on driving?
Yeah, but it is I was in my boss's car, and the thing, I mean, literally, I was truly amazed. I mean, he took his hands off the wheel, it passed the truck, put blinkers on, went back into the lane. I mean, it was crazy. But and then
you were holding on white knuckled?
Yeah, it was a little bit disconcerting, I'll be honest. So I think that, and some of the things you're doing with The self-parking is pretty cool. If you have to parallel park, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a bit anybody. So I think they're doing some good things in there. I think they've also done some horrible things relative to diving into the digital displays where analog, to me, I'm an analog guy. I like buttons and switches and not these giant screens with stuff. So, you know, I think there's good and bad there. And obviously in some of these, they haven't talked to their customers because the screen is horrible. How could you have a UX guy talking to a customer and then deliver something that's so bad that you get pissed off every time you have to change the heat or do something on your car?
No, I get that. And it's interesting. You think of something like OnStar, and you would think that the cameras, as they're adding cameras for, you know, parking and stuff, would in sensors, there would be so many more things they could have bundled with that, but they don't even think about that. And it takes aftermarket things like cameras and stuff to prove the business case, where the automobile companies should probably be proving themselves.
Yeah, and who wants to have all these wires hanging off of your mirror
Yeah.
for forward-facing and back-facing cameras? I mean, it's nuts. So, but I think there's,
Yeah.
you know, certainly good things to do, opportunities there.
Yeah, I agree with it. Hey, Dutch, how are you?
Hey, I'm great. I'm
good.
thankful that Clint was able to get us off of that rant of what's wrong with product management. Because I was afraid I was going to be the one to bring us back on the topic of real world examples, which to me means outside of the technology field and products themselves. So my real world example of product management is Formula One racing. It's understood by those who follow it, which is a lot of Europeans in this case. Americans don't understand it. They just think it's motor racing and they associate it to NASCAR, which is just a bunch of left turns. Formula One isn't like that. There's left and right turns, there's straightaways, there's the, you know, it's the courses are all different. There is a team manager who is the product manager, takes all of the problems, finds the solutions, negotiates with the engineering team, is able to collaborate with the pit crew, which is customer success. The thing that's unique that people don't realize unless you follow it is the driver isn't really part of the team per se. The driver's the customer. The FIA really makes all the rules and the guidelines and the requirements. Like this is how your cars need to be able to perform, and these are the rules that they can't do this and this and this. But the drivers aren't like linked to a team for their whole career. If they get a better offer from a different team, even in Formula One or 2 or 3 or even Formula E for that matter, the electric cars, they'll jump ship. If they have more value with another team, with another product car, they'll go that way. Now there's customer loyalty. They will stick with a team as long as they feel like they can get what they want. But the engineering team will even build the car for, they'll have 2 different drivers, and they'll maybe gear it towards the better driver so that driver can be more successful. And well, you're using the same car as our champion. You're just going to have to figure out how to use it the way that you need to use it. But this is what we're doing because we can now be successful and gain revenue from sponsors and everything else. Formula One racing is product management in practice in the real world.
It's interesting because you talk about it from the teams and sponsors and drivers, but you could also look at it, you know, traditionally it has been European based. Liberty Media bought it from Charles Eccleston or whatever his name was, who was the main owner of it. And he was like, this is only a European thing. It's not going to make sense in the United States. So what they do, they partnered with Netflix to create the whole Netflix series on it. And all of a sudden it's starting to blow up in the United States. And so they looked at it as a product differently. 2 different product leaders had different strategies and visions for what it could be. I keep putting my air quotes up in the balloons.
Yeah, it's your air quotes that keeps doing your balloons. But now even it's branched off into electric cars. Yeah. And that own strategy and everything else too. I mean, there's tire management, there's fuel management. There's just so much more to it.
I like it because it's on multiple facets where you can look at that.
Yep.
Awesome. Clay, You've had some comments, but you've been quiet otherwise.
Trying to be quieter. So my company that I've run for a little over 20 years is in healthcare. So I guess that would be, and I also keep missing the other email about, I get the poll and I forget to answer the other question. And of course in healthcare, it's essentially, you don't have a free market, you have a menage a trois, right? You have a customer, a provider, and the insurance company. And the insurance company dominates everything. And they're the one with no skin in the game, right? And they've insinuated themselves between the customer and the provider and just, get their 20% rent seeking. And the other thing I'll say is and observing it in the real world, I see mostly the failure modes. There's a lot of companies, it seems like, that basically get big, become a semi-monopoly, and then squeeze out as much money as they can. And nobody really seems to be assigned to keeping the customer happy. It's more, how much more blood can we get out of this turnip? So I have pivoted because I'm a recovering overhelper who inflicted my help on far too many people. And I would talk to you and go, hey, there's this thing your company's doing and it's losing you all this money. So I'm actually trying to have more of a coaching mindset where I'm only helping people who've asked for help, which is a very low percentage.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something to be said for even observing industry and business, how people stop doing product management, right? I talk in our product strategy course about the need to find the next curve, right? Charles Handy would call it the second curve. And too often companies wait too long until it's too far decline to be able to do a proper second curve. And they're more focused on financial engineering than they are on creating value for the market. And this is what product management is about, at least in my lens, is that product management is about creating value for the customer and the company, both of those things.
But it's the long game, and everybody now is playing a shorter and shorter game.
Yeah. Well,
let's eat the seed corn, right? Yeah.
Yeah. We could have a whole microeconomic discussion on as societies mature, they lead to a financial rent-seeking models, and but we'll save that anti-capitalist rant maybe for next year. So we did the poll late on Wednesday. I was traveling, so we did. Question: what causes you to think the most about product management and products in the real world? A problem that you had not thought of but makes sense. Positioning or messaging that resonates. A CX UX that is next level. Strategy aspects, which are new markets, new products, channels, etc. And other, it depends. And this is, to me, this is each person's personal. What's the thing that triggers you? Where do you see it? So there's no winner or loser. That's why I was willing to vote for one that nobody had voted for, strategy. Because I think of new markets and new products. I think my whole lens is Ansoff's growth strategy matrix. I'm like, ooh, look at how Tide's getting into a new market by licensing their name. Look at how this pest control company has now added lawn care products, right? Or it was lawn care company adding mosquito control, getting into that type of stuff. That's where my lens tends to go. I voted for that one. I also wanted to see how things would change year over year. I didn't do the exact same poll, but I kept the top performers from the year before. And early in the poll, problems was taking the lead. I'm like, ooh, problems going to take over for UX CX. But then in the end, UX CX won again. Design is what people tend to see the most. I'm going to go to Elliot. UX CX, you talked about your tonal machine and how it just blew you away.
Yep, it is on the wall right behind me.
I can't see it. It's because you got your...
it's behind the wall. I mean, like literally on the other side. Sorry. I am a tonal nerd in general, but for me, what I tend to draw inspiration from seeing something, and I kind of connect things to my past and then the future. That's my style of thinking in product management. With post-COVID, was looking for something to kind of really break me out of a physical slump as well, and started seeing a ton of advertisements with LeBron and Serena Williams about the tonal. And I was like, okay, well, their branding is on point. Their branding is fantastic. This is great. And they have a store nearby. I'll go and check it out. And basically it was like a magnet that was just drawing me in. And then they basically just handed me this handle and they said, just go. They didn't even give me any kind of training at all. They basically just walked in, they said, here, do a goblet squat, which is a pretty simple move. And I clicked the button on the side, the weight loaded up, and I was like, just like that, just like on the screen. I don't even know what that is. But it loaded up and I was like, yes, this is it. And I did literally one squat and I was already sold. But then I kept going through it. And the more I did it, I was like, okay, this is fantastic. And then I had to wait 5 weeks and then I got it. And then as soon as I started doing it, I was just addicted to kind of getting it right, setting personal bests, setting volume records, the communities and things like that. It's probably added years to my life, like my lifespan. And then what is Dr. Pete Attia said, like health span? I think it's added to my health span as well, in terms of my legs have never been stronger. I have never been this fit, even when I was like doing like P90X, Tough Mudders and stuff like that. So it is.
Yeah,
it is,
and Attia,
yeah.
And Attia says that that diet can hurt you, but it really can't help you too much beyond a certain point. But exercise can hurt you or help you. So that's where you want to put your effort and longevity.
Love it. Yeah.
So,
And what is a product?
We're going off into post-capital, late stage capitalism, macroeconomics, the failures of product management, and health. Gosh, we're just hitting every topic today. So, but that design sold you. That clicked you right away. How easy it was, the customer experience.
Yeah. Physical design plus the technical design. I think it's the best combination, physical product, hardware with software that I've ever used, in terms of getting things done, like correcting my form, which I hate, but it like gives me like legit corrections and things like that. It's just, it inspires me to go there and push play.
Awesome. And now, Clay, I almost feel like you should be barred from this one because you come from a design background, but you also voted for CXUX.
Yeah. Well, and for all the reasons that we just heard on the exercise machine, I notice it when it works, and sadly, it's because it usually doesn't work. Like Stripe, oh my God, they look so clunky, but their interface is amazing. Everything is clickable, so you never have to go to the menu to navigate. You can always find what you want right there in the text.
Yeah, awesome. May, you went with problems.
I did because.
But you actually put in there what I should have put in there, but bad product decisions that you pay attention to.
Okay, so first it's like when I start noticing a product, it's like, oh shit, this is a product. Like that's kind of what goes through my head, and it's that happens. That happens when I notice that it's solving a problem that I didn't know I had. So that's kind of when I pay attention. When I do pay attention to good UX, it's like, oh, this is nice, right? Like this is nice, but it's not really. I don't notice it for as a product. I notice it as like good design, and I feel like I separate the two because I guess I spend so much time thinking about product management. Yeah, like so I have a rule, and it's actually really hard to follow. When a company makes a really bad product decision that I'm like, I out of principle, I cannot support them, I cancel my subscriptions. And I'm like very, very, very close to canceling my Spotify subscription. So, which is, like, it's really hard to do. But at the same time, the other day I got a Google ad in my Gmail that looked like a legitimate email, but it was a phishing scam. But because it was an ad, a paid ad, it was boosted to the top in my regular inbox, and it looked like it was from a news source that I would trust. You click on the link and you go to a site that looks exactly like the news source that I would trust, except the URL is different, right? Like you would never have thought if it wasn't that
And
sketchy of
Google Ads is supporting this scam.
exactly, right? So for me, I'm like, oh, is it time to finally de-Google?
Yeah.
And it's a daunting task. Like I listed off everything I was still using on Google, and like, nah,
Their
It's
tentacles
tough.
are everywhere.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, Guy Kawasaki had just posted in LinkedIn about, do I buy the new lock set I need on Amazon, which with carbon, creates more carbon issues, or do I go to Home Depot to buy it where I don't support the politics of the owners of it? And it was an interesting, sometimes these trade-offs, and it sounds like a Google trade-off could be there too.
Hmm.
So,
And it's not a big deal, right? Like
yeah.
none of these things are a big deal. It's more just from a principle perspective, you notice things, and as consumers, like you vote with your money, right? So
Yep.
it's those kinds of choices, and it kind of sucks to make sometimes.
Completely and totally agree. Dom, I'm going to wait to get to you because I don't want to derail everybody else going back into a philosophical product management one. Dominique, if you're looking at this problem that you had that had not thought of but makes sense, positioning that resonates, CX UX that's next level, strategy aspects, or something else, what it caused you think the most about product management in the real world and products outside?
They're all good, but I would go with strategy. The reason I would go with that is because it to me it's an opportunity for, okay, I'm going to go into philosophical again, sorry, but we're doing it right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
here we have an opportunity. Let's follow the model to get to the right solution that has the customer value, versus just building stuff for the sake of building stuff. What's
Yeah.
funny
No,
is
I
when
agree. I agree.
when I was looking at this, when you brought it up, and I actually took a screenshot so I wouldn't have to make you bring it up all the time, but I read the last one as others depend on it, like
Oh,
as in customers, and I was actually thinking that, but then I'm like, yes, only if it is because it brings true customer value to them, not
yep.
because there's some kind of influential trend that that make people depend on things when they don't really need it. It's not really something that solves a problem.
Actually, that would be a great way to redo some. I may have to, if I decide to do this next year, bring in May's bad product decisions, but also have one of the answers be about the value that it creates, because isn't that what we're
Right.
supposed to do with products? It's about
Right.
creating value. So maybe that's something we notice.
Yeah.
Before I get to Dom and his view on, I wish I was on that team in the first place. Dutch, your take?
All of the above. I mean, what makes me think of product management in the real world? I mean, it depends, but like any of those things could make me think of it. The biggest thing, I guess, it may lean towards the strategy, because I look at competitive companies that have chosen different ways to solve the same problem. You
Yeah.
look at that VR headsets. Google in 2012 came out with Google Glass. They just this year stopped supporting it. But then also this year, Apple, they announced their Vision Pro, which will be out early 2024. What early means in product management is could be somewhat vague. Maybe that's first quarter, maybe that's first half. But they're not just making like something that's virtual reality. It's augmented, it's hybrid, because you can still interact with the real world around you as you're seeing these things. It solves it differently than Google did. It solves it differently than the Oculus did, that Facebook ended up buying. And some of it depends on the use case and what customers are wanting out of the same product. But do you want to use it for games? Do you want to use it for communication in business? I mean, do you want a computer on your head, basically? Eventually these things will get smaller. I'm very interested to see how this all pans out in my lifetime, and what my grandkids are going to be experiencing on a day-to-day basis, like it's nothing new. But yeah, it's really how do different different organizations solve the same problem in their unique way, for different customer bases, basically.
No, I love that. Yeah, this isn't all of the above. All of these things are things that I do notice. How I talked
Yeah.
about noticing a bolt on a stop sign, which is the problem. I had not thought much about that time, but I tend to lead with strategy. Dominic, let's talk a little bit about, for you, it seemed like what makes you thinking about is seeing other teams or other places where people are doing it well. Is that sort of the right? Wishing you were part of that.
All my career B2B, right? And what I'm really, really passionate about is learning and understanding how other teams, right, solve problems for customers that we don't have in a particular, segment, and learning from those experiences. How can we augment our own products to maybe solve problems that we cannot identify in the B2B, but are used in B2C. So I'll just
using them as an inspiration or an analog that you can.
Yeah. So
give the example you.
And the example is, on an elevator, right? So your customer is a set of, a certain segment, but the passenger never pays an elevator ever, right? But he is the one that is using it, goes in, outside, right? And following and understanding what's around us and other type of products, we can really get into customer versus user, and get into those heads and help identify their pain points and benefit and upsell a B2B product.
It's interesting because I'm going to go back to Dutch's Formula One. Like, manufacturing companies sent people to NASCAR to watch and train with the pit crews to understand how do they do what they do so quickly, and use that inspiration to help them reconfigure and because in many manufacturing plants you have to make slight modifications depending on what you're producing at the time. And I love that idea of finding, it's not just about me looking at it, it's about how do we take that inspiration of what we see in other products in the real world and use that to help us with our product. Dom, you just sort of somehow tied a nice bow around the philosophical conversations and this poll question. I appreciate your ability to do that. Thank you. I'm going to, as always, I take audibles at time, and I'm going to take a change. And so this is a question I always love asking, getting people to think about, because it really gets on their mind at the time. And we've done it before. If you could be product manager for a day of any product you use, and let's suspend the time reality that you can't get anything done in a day, and say that you could fix something, right? You could build a requirement or whatever it may be. What product would it be, and what would you do? And I'm going to start with Clay, since he appreciated you can't do anything in a day.
Well, what I was going to say is that's just time to get frustrated. My op is Microsoft Word, and get them to fix outlining, which has not worked since they brought Microsoft Word out.
Okay, I like that.
Of outlining.
Yeah, there are whole businesses I know. Actually, a client of mine has built their whole business on making it easier for one segment of the market to do outlining for compliance-related documents. It's amazing how bad it is. So I love that. That actually resonates with me. Dutch.
I would be a product manager at Peloton. And there would be two things that I would do. One would be introduce a recumbent bike, because not everyone can sit like that, like me, as well. The second thing I would do is be able to not just favorite instructors, but to be able to hide them, because I don't want to filter through instructors that I know I'm never going to take a class from again because of whatever reason. Those would be two things I would do if I was product manager.
I actually, those make sense. I like that.
Have you tried swiping left, right, or whatever it is?
Dominique.
Yeah, since you popped the question up, I've been thinking, what would it be?
Well, I did it to make sure people had time. So the first people didn't have.
I know. And it's been a long week for me, so my brain's a little bit all over the place. But I think it would be something around making it easier for something related to education and parenting, making it easier for kind of the holistic communication with teachers and resources to support students. And the reason I bring this up because it's something that I deal with, but I don't know that there is a product out there that can help me. Like I have to do a million different things. So like, I don't even know what the product is, but it'd be around that.
You would think that in your kid's school, whether it's Blackboard or Canvas or something, I mean, that to me, that's like a no-brainer that we should be.
There's a communication product with the teacher, right? But teachers, but I have to communicate individually with each one. There's a different app for the grades. There's a different thing here. And then in terms of like what kind of additional support I can bring, then I have to go elsewhere. So how could I bring everything into a more centralized place where I can kind of, or, manage it more.
I love it. Makes sense. Elliot.
Well, obviously I'm going to work at Tonal.
Just so you can.
Just so I can. A couple of things that I would want to look at. Number one would be putting it on the International Space Station or in space, because it is magnet-driven resistance. You could actually have it out there when you actually have like space tourism and things like that. The other thing that I want is that they don't allow you to do back squats for some reason. I'd love to figure out how to actually get that done, because front squats hurt the heck out of my shoulders, and I would prefer to do a back squat safely. And then I guess the third thing I would want to do is get the resistance up beyond 200 digital pounds, because I've maxed out a number of the exercises and I'd like to continue to go. I'd also like to not rip my wall down. So those would be my big three to do in one day.
All right. I love it. Dom.
I'll try to pull, exercise, health, education, all this together. There's no specific company or product, but helping individuals with their morning routine. There's so many different ways of applying a morning routine, and I'd love to, come up with a product that helps seamlessly individuals to actually execute their morning routines, being meditation, exercise, reading and whatnot. So that this because I've tried a lot of different methodologies, and it gets kind of all over the place, and it would be great to have kind of a sort of a regimen to help.
Yeah. No, I like it. May.
Back to Spotify. I listen to a lot of podcasts. The two things I would change is turn off autoplay on podcasts, because honestly, after I finish listening to a podcast, I would like a brief period to think about what I just heard. And also the ability to remove podcasts from my list so you don't keep autoplaying one that, like, something I was curious about, and then it just puts on the next one, and I don't ever want to listen to this again. This was a terrible podcast. I listened to it once, leave me alone. Yeah, so that's what I would like. I've been trying to find a I don't want to listen to this anymore button, and it doesn't exist. It's very sad.
I like that one. One thing, I'm not going to do it, but I would want to work for Zoom or Microsoft meetings and figure out what are these like balloons and fireworks that have happened, and how do we not communicate with people, and they just happen sometimes and they don't other times. But what I really would do, I'm going to sort of step out to a category. It would be Apple TV apps, and Hulu is one of the worst. All the apps like TV, video streaming apps just stink. Right? It stinks in discovery of content. There's so much content they have, and they don't make it easy to discover. There's no good AI models for predicting stuff, I have found. And more so, they don't work well. They're just navigation on them stinks. I would want to fix that.
what's amazing is how many don't get fast forwarding right, and it's just a freaking algorithm. So simple.
Yeah. So that would be me. Maybe that means I watch too much TV. But I would probably try to fix something in that. So guys, thank you so much for this all over the board conversation of product management in the world, from Elliot and his tonal, to May and her Spotify, to Dom and wanting to fix frameworks and make people successful again.
Hey, Grant,
And
this is product management in the real world. We go all over the place to
We do.
understand the full context.
we do. And as always, this is my favorite hour of the week. Just being able to talk with such great friends, people who bring me new perspectives. I really appreciate it. Thanks everybody for wonderful conversation. Great stuff in the chat. When we return in the new year, our first topic is going to be failure in product management. I really got a good inspiration from May, and Clint had posted something in LinkedIn today about failure. And so I think this is a topic we probably should talk about, and we will in 2024. Thank you, everybody, for a great year of these conversations, participating topics. We've added some great new voices to the room, and I look forward to adding more in 2024. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Have a great holiday. Have a great new year. We'll see you guys next year. Take care, everybody.
All right.